you know, because somehow you could relate. For me, that's where the craft is. The craft is in understanding the layers of a human being and assembling that in your piece, such that when another human being, regardless of where they're from, what they look like, what they believe, encounters it, in amidst thinking, yo, I don't know this life at all. Oh my goodness, I don't understand those decisions at all. But wow, I get something. I get it. I think I get it. So how does one do that? As I said, I made a few notes, and I'm gonna riff along a little bit for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then I'll stop, and hopefully that is the bulk of what continue based on like a question and answer. If people can catch Tenyola or Aida, if you could catch people up in the chat so we don't lose time catching people up. And if at any point you can't hear me, please wave or text or whistle. I am in Joburg. We are having a lot of load shedding challenges, blackouts really. Load shedding is a nice word for blackouts. If I go out, that is probably why. So just tell me, and I'll so that I know, because I might not.
All right, we can hear you, Yewande.
Can you hear me now?
We've been able to hear you for a bit.
You've been able to hear me, okay? Because my computer sent me a love letter saying my connection is unstable. Okay, so I think the thing. So the one thing I wanted to say is time. That's the only way I know how to do it. Is that something like that takes time. It takes kind of constructing, and it takes a lot of detailed, hidden work. It's unseen. The reader is not going to see it in the text. They will feel it when they read the story, but they won't see the kind of labor you've put into doing the character. So it's hidden, unseen work that happens before. Remember, one thing I always remind myself is that it's a layering. A character is layered. We are not any of us one-dimensional. Here we are in a workshop, and I really love that KIS was like, I have a son, or many people have said, I'm dealing with children. You know, we have a job, we have this, we have partners, we have sick parents, we're in debt, or we're in surplus, or we're like, the human character, the human being is layered and complex. And so our characters in our novels can be layered and complex. Now, almost everything I say as a rule ought to be broken. So I also want to say there's a lot of value and humor to be gotten from having very flat characters that are not layered and that are singular. But you have to craft that. It's not like that because you're lazy. It's like that because you are trying to make a point. So maybe in a story, in a romantic novel, for instance, maybe it's really valuable as a humorous point to have one character that is just misogynistic. And throughout the text, that you can always count on this character to have sort of derivative comments, maybe about women. And then maybe at the end, you mix it up a bit and see that even they have certain complexities. So what I enjoy doing with characters and this idea of depth is reminding people that we're constantly stereotyping people. KIS, that KIS, I know him. He's X, he's Y. Yewande, I know that one. Her father's like this. You know, she does that thing. She doesn't know anything. You know, we sum people up like this. And what I love is in my characters to remind us as human beings that you actually don't know. The thing is, you actually don't know. You know, you assume somebody is wealthy until they write to you and ask to borrow money. You're like, I thought that this one's father was like this. So I love characters and stories that surprise me and remind me about my own stereotyping and my own prejudices. So this is the idea of layers. So reminding yourself as you craft that characters are layered. So I think a sort of a one tech, so I'm going to just make some, so we talked about layering. I mean, we'll sort of see how you do that. But the layering is that a person doesn't only exist in one dimension. So the drug dealer goes and does the deal, gets the money, and goes and pays his son's school fees. Right? I mean because we don't want to contend with that the drug dealer also has children that have school fees and need food need food to eat and so on. That is the layering. I'm not saying that makes the drug dealer a good person, and I'm not actually assuming that you have to sympathize with the drug dealer, but you might find you do. But I'm saying this is how you start to create complexity, and that kind of, so already, if you go from one scene where the drug dealer is hardened with his gun, and then you go for another scene where he's holding a newborn, for instance, and paying the doctor for the delivery, what you now have is intrigue and complexity. And your reader is like, okay. I mean, they definitely want to read on because they're like, okay, where are we going with this? Because the typical thing is to just say drug dealer, criminal, go to jail. But now, as a storyteller, you're saying, hang on, what is the milieu in which this drug dealer exists? What's going on? So that's another thing you can do with, and that's layering. That's an example of layering. I want to touch on another term, a kind of slightly technical term, which you're all familiar with, is the arc. So a character, part of what makes a character compelling would be that you don't start, the character doesn't begin the novel saying, I don't know, I'm just trying to not be, I don't know, we have such good people here. I don't want to offend anybody, but okay, let's do that. The character doesn't start the novel saying, sex is bad, your main character, sex is bad, sex is evil, I don't know, sex before marriage is evil and bad and it's against the religion, and end the novel, your main character's, sex is bad, it's immoral, sex before marriage is immoral. You don't, that's not the arc, because that's saying one note at the beginning and still the same note at the end. Nothing's changed, nothing's shifted, nothing's been learned, there's no arc. So part of what creates this compelling figure that you want to read on, and remember, I'm talking about the main protagonist, I'm talking about your main characters, the character that is going to drive your story. Part of what creates that is this sense of an arc. Because again, as human beings, I know I'm not the same Yewande as I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago, heck, even 2 months. Even physically, we understand that biologically, my body's changed. Mentally, I've learned things, I've lost things, I've forgotten things, I've remembered things. That's the complexity of life. So how does your character mirror that? How do you create a character that people can relate to based on an arc? So you can design that arc, right? You can say, well, you can ask yourself as you start writing, okay, what's this character's arc? What is it they begin with? What do they contend with in the middle? And where do they end? So I want to talk a little bit more about arc. Another way of relating to arc is this other term. So I know you may have heard this before, but the million naira question, or the billion naira question, what does your character, just writing it here, want? What does your character want? I can't now remember who said this, maybe one of you do, but there's that famous saying that your character must want something, even if it's a glass of water, right? It doesn't, so in other words, if your character's in a room, a square room, they're in one corner and the water table is on the other corner, and that's your story, your character going from one corner to the other and maybe bumping into 3 or 4 people along the way. That's your story. That's a good story. Why? Because the character wants something. A character that doesn't want something you're going to struggle to design an arc. Okay? And sitting there in your seats, wherever you are, you can ask yourself, okay, because it's true. Almost every human being, wherever they are, wants something. And some might want to die, by the way, right? That's a want. Some might want not to want. But there's a want, there's a desire. What does your character desire? It's key. If you do no other work with your character but that, and you ask yourself that on every page, what do they want? And then the story is whether, do they get it? Do they not get it? Should they get it? Should they not get it? And the other key thing with this thing of wanting and desiring, so and okay, I see there's lots of, so let me say my last point and then maybe I'll pause because I've talked a lot, and I'll look at your comments. I see Joy writing comments, and I'll also take some questions and welcome a few of the newcomers. So just very much related to what does your character want is, it seems a bit wicked, but whatever your character wants, they have to be thwarted. There's no story. Think of the great novels, I don't know, think of all the great novels. There's no story unless that desire is thwarted, stopped, blocked, prevented. That's your story. Your story is always X wants, 1, and B stops X from getting 1. I don't know why I use those particular figures, but you know what I mean? That's your story. If you don't have that, you'll struggle to get all the things we know make story yummy. Conflict, right? Intrigue, complexity, layers, complication, plot, this driving plot that makes somebody turn the page because they're like, okay, are they going to get it now? Oh, no, didn't get it. Are they going to get, no. So the story is, what does your character want? And then your job is to constantly thwart that. You can thwart it. So you have a protagonist who wants something. You can thwart it with the antagonist who's going to stop them. Sometimes that antagonist is a villain. Sometimes that antagonist is not a villain. Maybe these two are lovers, right? So it doesn't have to be a villainous character. It can also be somebody that's just thwarting the desire. I had a few more notes, but I actually want to take comments and welcome some people. And then maybe later I'll finish my notes and then we can continue. So I'm zooming up to make sure I haven't forgotten anybody. So hi everyone that's come. Okay, so I want to hear from Joy. Couple of things. Okay, Joy is sharing a lot. So I want to hear from, and Joy, sorry, which do you prefer, Ujenu or Joy? And also I want to invite people who've just joined to say hi, say where you are, say what you're dealing with and struggling with characters. We're just having a conversation here. Joy is fine. Okay, thanks. Okay, go ahead, Joy. And sorry, Aida, do you want to say something?
Oh yeah, so when you were speaking, I thought I didn't want to interrupt you at the time, but I just kept thinking about Breaking Bad because I think that's I think that I'm very, very much fascinated by the script writers at this point. I don't know how many people have seen Breaking Bad, but I'm at season 5 and it's like one of the best written scripts. And so I just kept thinking about layers and the layers of the character. I think the main character, who's this Walt White, is a drug dealer who's making meth. And for some weird reason, you want him to get away with it. So like everything he kept saying just kept resonating with that. And I think it's gotten a lot of acclaim for being one of the best written scripts ever. And so everything you said was just like, like the script writers are really good. It wasn't about the picture. I don't think its sellability is about the picture or the acting per se. It's actually in how the script was developed, how, he started as a chemistry teacher in a school and he has cancer and his kid is like,
wait, don't do any spoilers. Don't do any spoilers.
Oh, all right then, so you should check it out. I'm sorry, Joyce.
That's awesome. No, that's an awesome recommendation, Aida. I love what you say. And also a general comment is read, if you're trying to write fiction, read nonfiction or start reading scripts or watching series. I happen to be in a wonderful position now where I'm doing an adaptation course, script writing course, book to script. And it's fascinating and it helps the fiction. right? And reading biographies help. So cross-purposing like that is excellent. So I love that you bring that up. Joy, please go ahead. And anyone else who's new, if you want to just shout out, feel free to do so. But let's start with Joy. If you can talk, you might not be able to talk. Joy, can you talk? Okay. Anybody, while Joy is maybe finding a moment. Sorry, just typing. Okay, perfect. So you're typing. Let's have a look. You've typed some things that I want to read. I may have missed them. Light bulb moment. I've never considered that I had to apply certain formula to writing fiction the way I would do with writing a business plan. Yeah, and the thing with the formula, just so you know, is like I always say, it's there to be broken, right? Because I don't think there should be rules. I mean, you know, there's this idea that there are rules. Of course, there are some rules because this is what works, but don't ever feel restricted by those, right? You know, a chess player, there's some things, the pawn can do this, the bishop can do that, but they don't necessarily have to feel restricted by those rules. So have those rules serve you. Learn them and later learn how to break them. But absolutely, wow, I'm glad you had that. I'm glad you had that. So what you just thought, I'll just throw my fiction out there. It's serious. You know, my biggest complaint, I get on a plane, somebody says, what do you do? I say, oh, I write novels. Like, oh, fiction. You see their face, you know, and they just think, oh, because you make it up, it just means like it's at the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah, it's not as good as something that is real.
Oh, yeah, I mean, obviously these are Neanderthals, sorry. I just think anybody who thinks fiction is, but they do, it's a certain kind of person who's on a flight who's like, oh, I only read biographies. You know, they're so proud of themselves.
Yeah, but like super.
Fiction is work. It's such a labor, and we have all those things. Fiction is the lie that tells the truth. Fiction is like remembering what never happened. I mean, this idea that fiction is just that because it's invented, it's silly.
It's not as good. It doesn't have.
Yeah, like it's trivial.
I think that some of the greatest. I'm sorry that I'm moving to films a lot because I do read a lot as well. But I think that some of the greatest films, because I think films sell more and they reach more people. I think in some scenarios you see that after a movie comes out or a series comes out, there's so much more wave, like a tidal wave drifting towards the book more. So I'm just sort of in this stage where I think I appreciate scripts now, because while I'm reading while I'm watching every movie, I can think about the script behind it. And I wanted to say this because since I was really young, I've been really fascinated with the South African scripts. Like I grew up watching Rhythm City and Scandal, and like they're so much better than Nigerian shows. I'm sorry, like if you haven't seen South African series, you should go check out some of those ones. And it's the layering, it's the details. And even though I see actors and glamour in a picture, I can't stop thinking about the script writers who have this going, who've just invented all of these things, and they try to be as urban and as contemporary in its form. I think that Nigerian script writers could take notes from those things, and in writing. So I think books like To Kill a Mockingbird is fiction, but you don't read it without wanting to know that it was real. Right, it's one of the greatest fictions ever written, if you ask me. The Magnificent Ambition, same thing. And even though The Great Gatsby is such a success, it's still fiction that was inspired by the artist's life. And so I realized that a lot of times writers leave a little bit of themselves in what they write. So even though it's fiction, if you look deep enough, you would realize that there's a little bit of themselves in it.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I wanted to, Oluwa Bukumi, I'll come to you shortly. I want to just finish. So, Joy, you said there's a Korean saying that for lovers to deepen their relationship, they must face and overcome obstacles. This parallels with the rule of 40. Yeah. I mean, it's this, and it's wonderful. Once you decide you can do that, you keep putting obstacles in their way. So let's have a look. I just want to see. I face situations where I don't like the character and I just give up on the story. That's interesting. Okay, and I'll put that to the group actually. How to overcome my bias. Sorry, and I'm not the one who said fiction is the lie that tells the truth. I mean, I don't credit me with the quote. I'm quoting someone whom, I mean, if someone can Google it, you'll find out who it was. I wish it were me, it's not. And it was Siri Hustvedt who said, fiction is like remembering what never happened. Okay, so I think this is an interesting question. I face situations where I don't like the character and I just give up on the story. In some ways, you're talking about being a reader and trying to get beyond a certain bias as a reader. I mean, it could be one thing. Maybe it's a bad book, because sometimes there are books where you don't like the character, but you keep reading. I'm a fan of I don't like this idea that the character has to be likable, but there's a distinction between having empathy for and liking. So it might be clear to the author that, okay, people will not like this character, but there's a way I will do my work that they will empathize. They will, somewhere in this arc of the story, they will see, okay, this is what happened, right? Whatever, your crappy childhood, or you're this, or you're that, or you were stuck in a moment and you had to. So don't focus so much on, I'm just coming back to being the author of such a book, Joy. I mean, you need to sort out your biases, but let's say you're writing that book and somebody's like, oh, I didn't like the character, I stopped reading. Then it's asking yourself, okay, my job is not to get you to like the character, but part of my job, sure, is to get you to empathize. Why? Because I need you to go along. I need you to not drop the book. And you don't drop it because there's somewhere, whatever small kernel of empathy that the author has managed to sow. Yeah, spot on, KIS. I mean, but even, I love this comparison to real life. Even in real life, there are people that we don't like, but in a moment we're like, okay. And also there are people, by the way, we initially don't like, and after some time we realize we like them a bit more. Because of this, because of that. Maybe you don't. I mean, I'm always amazed. I love this. I'm at the airport and maybe you're all standing around and you're all by yourself, and then somebody's family comes and they change in a good way, like they soften, right? Or they greet their person and they hug them and they soften, and you realize, oh, that's a human being. So you might not like your teacher in the classroom, and then you step outside and you see that, I don't know, her elder son picks her up, and you see an interaction between them, and you suddenly like her a bit more the next day. So same in story, absolutely. What are those things? What are those little things, little scenes we plant to add layers to our characters and add complexity? Olua Bukumi, sorry, your hand's been up a while. Please go ahead.
Hello, hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I was just very interested in character layering and characters arc.
We
I'm a
lost
movement
you.
artist,
Okay,
and as
go
one
ahead.
like this, and as one who's like consistently creating dance pieces, I've always been curious, or I'm always engaging the idea of like giving a character, especially like if it's a solo piece, but like being able to show the different faces of like what this person is. And so when you were talking about from point A to point Z of a character in the book and then everything between, I was imagining it in like a dance piece where, for instance, someone wants to show struggle, you know, and they start out with, you know, maybe sometimes agony. Some pieces end with the same agony. Some pieces end with like the person maybe getting what they want. And some pieces end like with the person not getting what they want, but finding a kind of resolve or peace, you know, within that. And then there's all the struggle, pain, or finding joy from time to time in between. And in my current, or in my very recent creation, my question is the concept of softness, you know, and I liken that to like taking again from the reality in creation, like where sometimes it feels like there is a lot like, oh, not so great things happening in the world, and you're reflecting that whether in your writing or in a dance piece. And how do you then find softness in between all of that? And I think it's very much connected to character layering. It's what makes the piece complex, but it's also what makes it relatable, because although sometimes we grieve, in the period of grieving, there are times that we also laugh, you know? So how to make that connection, not just like in like, but like, so I guess I'm just asking if there are like ways like to connect that transition together. And with characters arc, you had mentioned that it's important to state what the character wants. But like sometimes in pieces, it's also that like the character finds what they want on the journey, and that this factor isn't established from the get-go. Like it's not something that they necessarily know in the beginning. And I guess it's relevant even in the creative process, that sometimes when you're writing, you don't even know like where it's leading. And now I'm bringing the writer in as a character as well, because like, was it you or I that said we leave traces of ourselves in our works? Yeah, so I don't know if you have anything to
Okay,
say.
that's awesome. Oh, I love dance. So I love that you're bringing in dance, and I'm assuming you're a choreographer. Yeah, anybody here, if you want to put links to your work or where we can find out more about your work, please do that, because I think that's part of what this is. I love your questions. So, so a couple of things. Firstly, what I was going to say next is, at what point does this kind of crafting happen? I work in a very messy, organic way. I don't, for instance, I don't plot out my my novel. You know, I don't do a character, whatever they call it. I don't like say, I'm sorry, I don't do a chapter plot where I'm like, this happens in chapter 1, this happens in chapter 2. I mostly have the idea of a character in my mind, and I just go with it and do a lot of free writing. And I do that for a long time. I usually do that for pretty much the length of a novel. Like I would just write 50 to 80,000 words. Obviously, as you're writing, because it takes time, I'm thinking, I'm shaping. I think, oh, I need a scene like this. What about a scene like this? What if this happened? Oh, what if that happened? And then I have at the end of it, I have a body of work that's pretty rough, pretty rough. And I do a lot of rewrites. And in the rewriting, begin to do a lot more craft. I might then, to your question, start to ask myself, what does this character want? I might discover that they don't want anything, which is maybe why it's not working. And I need to go back and say, hang on, Yewande, what does this person want? Think. Oh, maybe they want this. Could that work? And I insert it into the story and see if it brings the story to life. So we know that, I mean, there are many ways to write novels, and we know that many of those ways are messy. So I don't want you to imagine this is a paint by numbers exercise with characters, with the laying of characters. It's not something you do in the beginning and then you full steam ahead. It's messy, it's iterative, it's back and forth, it's testing, it's checking, it's realizing something's stuck, it's getting it unstuck, something else sticks, get that unstuck. Sometimes sometimes the character just isn't working. Many times in my process of writing novels, I've just let characters go. I'm like, okay, this character isn't needed. I don't need this. It's taking up space, making it really difficult to get the story moving. So it's messy. It is messy, a messy process. It's not neat and tidy. And then to your other question, that also is to your question about the writer not knowing what they want. Absolutely. I never, it's a bit like, I think it's Groucho Marx who said, I don't ever want to belong to a club that will have me as a member. But I also feel like I don't ever want to write a book whose ending I know. It's very depressing for me to write a book whose ending I know. I want to discover the ending as I write the book. I don't want to know what's going to happen. So, so that it's not necessary that you know what's going to happen, at least the way I write. But with the character, the reason I'm saying the want is important, the want is what gets you from page to page. And it can, that's why I said it can be anything. It doesn't have to be, I want to save the world. It doesn't have to be lofty or grand. It can be, I need a glass of water. It can be, I need the toilet. It can be, I need to get to the end of this month. This is the worst month of my life. I need to get, there has to be something. Whatever that need, I need to brush my teeth. I've got to brush my hair. I need to get the dust out of my eye. I have to get this shirt off of me. I have, like it, why? Because the assertion is that this is one of the units of living, needs, wants, desires. However, the minutiae, it could be small, it doesn't have to be big, but that is one of the building blocks of story. Without that, I'm not saying it's impossible, and it's been done, of course, but if we're talking about a course about, a workshop on compelling characters, that's a key ingredient to at least begin with. Learn to break it later, absolutely. Learn to break that rule. But another thing you touch on, which I think is I'm going to mention, is that there are wants and there are needs. So your character will have a want. It's the external thing that they consciously want. So I want a boyfriend. And that's my story. I'm lonely, I want a partner. Okay? But what is the real need? Maybe the real need is that I need to, not to be too cute, but I need to love myself. Or maybe I need to be in love with the earth. And so the story is in me, the character, realizing that, no, I don't need somebody around to be in love with. My real journey, which is in the need, is in falling in love with the earth. And I become a farmer at the end instead of becoming a girlfriend. It's another layer. I didn't actually want to bring it in because you don't have a lot of time. And I've tried to just, keep the high notes, but there are wants and there are needs. And you can define that for your character at the beginning. You can say, okay, here's a character who wants to be rich. But actually, this is a story about a person who needs to return to their homeland, for instance. Okay, and that's where you get your layers. So the story doesn't have to be about my character wants to be rich and at the end of the story they're rich. That's okay, but that's also a bit dull. Maybe at the end of the story they have the same amount or less than they had when they started, but they're fulfilled. And I think you were making that point. They're fulfilled, or they've learned something, or they are richer internally, not in monetary terms. So these are the complexities, I guess, that I'm talking about when I say layering, and it's not just one note. This is another way of putting what I mentioned earlier. What does your character want, and why and how are they having a hard time getting it? So I want to make a few, we don't have time, of course. Geez, compelling characters in 1 hour, that's insane. We need a whole week to do this properly. But I wanted to, all I could do was like drop a few things. And I think I wanted to end with a few comments. And then maybe I have a bit of time, I could take some questions as I hand over to Kukogho. So a couple of things, and this is the crafting stuff. You need to build a character Bible. You don't have all the answers at once. You can build a character Bible. You start. This is the invisible work, right? You have your document, character Bible. That contains their character's name. Maybe you wanted their birthday, the day they wish they were born on. What are their deepest fears? What's their earliest memory? What do their parents look like? What happened with their siblings? What are their dreams like? What are they? So in other words, that's why I say invisible work. Much of that might not land up physically in your novel, But this is, think of the character Bible as the way you get to know someone. When you meet someone first, you know their name maybe, and you know what they look like. Perhaps, I mean, these days you might not if it's online. And then as you get to know them, your knowledge builds. Same with character Bible. I don't assume that you know everything about your character instantly. This is we're in the realm of invention. So you build that Bible over time, or that document, just say Bible, you know, but you build that document on your character over time, and you put stuff in there. You can even put what they look like. You could go and pull some ideas. Sometimes it helps to have a sense of them. Do they walk with a limp? Do they have a lisp? Do they frown? Do they ever smile? Is their tooth chipped? Is one eye not working? You know, is one ear bigger than the other, but nobody knows except them? Nobody notices, but they know. You know, what are the quirks and idiosyncrasies about this person? That's how you start to build the complex and the layers, the complexity and the layers. So character Bible is something I wanted to mention. Then there's some really interesting exercises you can do. Again, it's the invisible work. So you have to be willing to do the invisible work. It's not words that necessarily will go into your novel. Exercises for character development. So, and there are many, some that are favorites of mine. One is, I love taking your character for a walk. You know, so you have your character. Well, take them down the road. Who do they see? Who do they talk to? Who don't they talk to? What do they notice? What don't they notice? Why? Just for fun. Another one you could do is, because all of that is getting to know them. Take the character. I'm just trying to make these notes. I don't know if they're valuable at all. Take character, go walk. Another thing you could do is take the character lunch with X. You could take the character to lunch with anybody. I mean, sure, it could be somebody reasonable like their mother or their neighbor, but it could be take the character to lunch with the president of the country. Take the character to lunch with, I don't know, someone who has a speech impediment. Does your character lose their temper? Are they patient? Do they? So the idea with these exercises, they're short, a page, 2 pages. The idea of the exercises is you will discover on the page, in the process, you will discover things about the character that you didn't already know, and that become useful for you in writing the novel, the story, whatever, the piece. So, so that's another thing you can do. You can sketch them. I guess I've got an architectural background, but I do believe we all have, you know, this is not, doesn't have to be, you know, perfect drawing, although I don't think such a thing exists, but sketch them, try and draw them. What, you know, what do they look like? Maybe go and grab collages of other people and put it in your notebook or your file on your computer, you know, or do a collage. Sometimes it helps if you have a picture of who they are in your head. At least in doing that, you ask yourself questions like, well, what do they look like? Do they have a mole that covers half their face? Do they, sorry, I'm going for the slightly dramatic stuff, but it doesn't have to be, you know, do they have a slight twitch? Are they left-handed? You know, these small details. And then, yeah, and so I guess what I'm saying is be prepared to do that kind of invisible work to build the character, put the time in, and over time, develop these nuances of a person. I'm going to stop there. I have some time to take a few questions before I hand over. I know lots of people have joined. I mean, if you're able to say hi or tell us where you are, or I'm also happy to take specific questions like I'm trying to write a book and I'm stuck. And I think it's because I'm stuck with characters and this is the problem, you know, how can we help? So I will pause talking and just, yeah, open up the floor to whoever wants to say anything. You might also have questions about some of the stuff I said, or something that wasn't clear, or that you want me to repeat. No questions?
Hi, Yewande, it's
Yes,
Essie.
Essie.
Hi, okay. Thank you so much. I have a comment. So I don't know if it frames as a question, but I think I loved your suggestion as it pertains to scripts and books when they were having that conversation. I'm someone who loves Grey's Anatomy, and I love it for the story and the drama. But I also, in fact, when Joy was sharing her comment, when Ada too was talking about like with scripts, I realized that like one of my favorite things at the beginning of every year is I like to go to LitHub. It's a bookish website where they tell you all the literary adaptations happening for the year. So I get very excited because I now get to add them to my TBR, read those ones, and then watch the movie too, right? And I'm always interested in seeing like, oh, the parts they remove. Some people are very angry, like this one was not 18, this one was 18. But I actually genuinely enjoy like the difference I see. So that recommendation you gave, that is definitely so, like I didn't even know when I heard you saying, oh, you're taking a course, I'm like, if somebody that's written 3 books is still taking courses. Maybe that's part of my bias. But you know, when you now said about books to script, I think that has opened a suggestion for me just in getting familiar, because those are 2 different creative forms that I love. So I think I'm now learning that even when you love 2 different kind of things, maybe you should also study the relationship. There was a word you talked just about the relationship between them, because it will probably even help you in your own crafts. And then there was something you said when you were talking about like with the character Bible, right? There's almost that guilt. Maybe it's because I like editing. Most times, even when you're writing, we can pretend all we want, but a lot of us also self-edit, even while writing, even if you're told don't, just don't, right? So, you know, maybe this this concept of a character Bible, I think is also something I'm probably going to take away with. So sort of, if I even have a story and it's not even as fleshed out as the way I want it to be, just even maybe if I know my character Bible, because there's a statement you made about how it's likely will not even go in, right? But even doing that invisible work, so even if it's not work my readers might get, maybe that's something I'm going to now explore doing, right? So I already now want to write about maybe one baby girl that has too much drama. So yeah, I'm telling myself this is the character Bible, and maybe that will make it easier for me to dump as much as I can and not worry as much about the editing. And I think I loved that exercise about like with the one specifically with sketching, like, oh, sketch, I don't know how to draw, right? But like, I'm always having medias about like, for example, with outfits I want to wear. So now, even as we're talking, I'll just think to myself, actually, if I already think of like the kind of outfits that like I'm creating, just the way I create for a Manashebi, I'm creating for what maybe someone is going to wear when she's going to beat up someone, like that already, like that's already an exercise I can see myself exploring. So yeah, I think I've loved those tips, and that thing you said about that invisible work, I think that's something I would now take on going forward. So instead of even worrying as much about self-editing, if I tell myself I'm doing a Bible, it even already means, let's say in the future I decide to be a token, I have things to draw upon for further books. So maybe I have a book 1 ready and I want to do a book 2. My character Bible already gives me an existing body of work to now draw from. So yeah, this has been very insightful for me. So yeah, those are my comments. Thank you.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, such insightful comments. And I mean, I love what you say about what the person is wearing, because those are choices, right, that a person makes. Why do I pull out my red dress today? What about Yewande's, you know, why? So these details. And then I love what you say about the self-edit. And I think I've shared it before in a different forum linked to the Abuja Writers Club. I don't know if I said the name properly, Literary Society. But we talked about bashers and swoopers. Which is a Kurt Vonnegut term, where he said the bashers are the self-editors. So you write, you know, 20 words, you delete 10 of them and write 2 more and delete everything and write more and delete, but you're self-editing as you're writing. And it's a pretty tough way to write, but of course people do write that way and it works for them, maybe. It's hard, I think, to write that way because you're in a creative space. And I feel like, for me, the most permissive space is best for creativity, where everything belongs. Nothing is wrong. Nothing has to be fixed just yet. We'll get to that later when we put the editor hat on. So the bashers are the ones who like it has to be perfect in the moment. And the swoopers are the ones that can come in and, you know, spit out, you know, I don't know, 1,000 words. They're all imperfect, it's fine. Swoop back and put another 2,000, swoop back and put down another 5,000. And then they come later and edit. So it's the same product at the end. In other words, hopefully a well-edited, crafted piece, but it's different methodologies. So I wanted to just mention that. And I love that maybe you have access to do some swooping via a character Bible. This thing is very valuable because it could be a place where I mean, sometimes I have a great character, I have no story to put them in. I'm like, oh my goodness, that person, put it in your character Bible. One day you have a ready character to throw into whatever novel or story presents itself. Anyway, any other comments or questions? Everyone is so quiet and polite, and I don't know, are you in banks and are you in queues and are you on the toilet? I don't know. Is anybody able to say anything?
Hi.
Hi, Khadija.
Hi. Yeah, it's Khadija.
Khadija.
I'm really enjoying this workshop. Thank you very much. I have a question about character Bible. Do you have like a guide or advice on how to create one that won't take too much time? Because okay, I'm writing a book. It's historical. It's a historical fiction. Though I want it to be as real as possible. So I have this character Bible, and it's on Excel and everything. And it's because so many characters in history concerning that particular period I'm trying to write about. There are so many people, so many characters, and too much detail. I feel like it's taking my whole time. I don't even have much time to, focus on the real writing. I'm busy building, and somehow there's too much things. Like it's a lot.
Yeah.
So do you have any guide, like where do you stop? Where do you, like a guide, something?
Yeah,
Do you have
okay,
any advice?
I'll try my best. Yeah, I mean, I think sounds like a wonderful project, and I really, yeah, wish you the best with that. I have just quickly, while you're talking, gone to a very simple Word document I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I remembered where it was. So I'm going to paste it here. I hope it works. Okay, good. And Kiss is going to be focusing on that in his session. So, okay, I'm just putting this here. This is basic, just some ideas for questions and begin a character Bible. But just wanted to say, Khadija, I mean, look, historical fiction is very involved, and if you're doing something, I don't know what range of years you're looking at and what span of time you're looking at. So it's very possible that it just is complicated and complex, and that's just the nature of the text and the project. And you just have to get your head around a way to deal with so many things going on. So there's that. But there's one thing I could quickly offer, and then I'll go because I'm eating your time. I apologize. I kissed them and I'll go. In fact, I might stick around and maybe listen because you might teach me something. So, but I'll be quiet and hand over to you. But what I could say, Khadija, is that you might need to, because something can be complex, but not complicated, right? So if it feels a bit unwieldy because there's so much, then you might need to look to simplify for yourself. And ways of doing that, again, I don't know your text, I don't know what you're specifically looking at, but you could say, actually, any story, for the most part, there's a protagonist, maybe there are two. So is your text the one that you can, okay, this is the protagonist. And maybe, because maybe you have 5 protagonists and you have to make a decision like, okay, is this working? If it's not working and I don't have a way to bring the reader along with 5 protagonists, of course there are ways, so you can also find those ways, but if you don't have a way, can I focus the story a bit? So because when you mention the Excel, and Excel sometimes simplifies things, but sometimes it complicates things. So that's the thing off the top of my head. I don't know if that's helpful, but I wondered how many protagonists do you have? Is the thought I had. Is that what's making it so complicated?
Uh-oh.
And yeah, and then, I mean, because we're talking about adaptation, what's interesting for me, because I'm in a process where I'm adapting something I've written, and I'm noticing how much I have to get rid of. Film, you don't have time in film. You don't have a lot of time in film for subplots, and so I'm noticing how much I have to focus the story. So if I had a little sub theme here, and it's like, not in the film, can't do that. It has to be focused. So that's an interesting exercise to sort of kill your darlings in a different way, and really streamline the text and focus the text. Be careful of trying to do too much. I always try and do too much. I'm so ambitious at the beginning of the project. I'm gonna do that. And again, at the end, it comes small. Just do this little thing well. Try and do it well. And when you're bigger and you've grown up, this is why I'm taking more courses. Who was it saying why you take courses? Maybe you can do those big grand things you're trying to do. So nothing wrong with doing something simple really, really well. And so I'd also say if you're struggling a bit, it might be, and I don't want to say don't be ambitious, but it might be, the ambition is also like, how can I tell a simple story that rocks the world? That's also ambitious. It doesn't have to be a complex story with 1 million people in it. It's so simple, but it really is powerful. Your ambition can be there versus I think this is not for
right.
you. I find I'm greedy. I'm like, I wanna, I was like, Yewande, just, don't be so greedy. Just do this thing, simple thing, and do it really well.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
If there are no other pressing questions, then let's hand over to the next speaker. Kukogho, Samson, father of one so far.
Hi, everybody. It's been so quite enlightening myself. I've been learning a lot from you, even though you touched on a few things I wanted to talk about. I'm just going to, just gloss over some of those areas. But yes, I'm going to be using the presentation. So let me see. Yeah. To kind of make it, let me see. Give me a few minutes. Yes. So we're talking about writing compelling characters, right? And when I got this topic, it was interesting for me because my novel, that was one major thing I had in mind. How do I make this characters really to be interesting? Yewande was talking about having the lady who said she was writing historical fiction. How many characters does she have? And this is the key thing you need to ask yourself. This story, if I'm going to have so many important characters, it may get more and more difficult to make them all interesting. In the end, maybe you need to kill off some of them very quickly, or don't even put them in the story at all. So that's how do you make your characters compelling, or your character, especially when you're writing a character-driven story. Your story will either be driven by the plot, where things happen and then the character, responds, or the character, where basically the character changes and then the story follows based off what the character changes, the changes in the character. So you're seeing a lot of internal turmoil. So how do you make a character interesting enough to the reader? And the first thing that came to me was this. The story is the character. You can't have an interesting character off of a non-story. And you can't have a good story without a good character. So for anybody who is thinking of creating a compelling narration, oh, okay, sorry. How is it now? Is it fine?
Yes, it's better, thanks.
Okay, yes. So yeah, I was saying the character and the story, they're literally two parts of the same whole that you cannot do without. So you cannot hope to have a compelling character without having a good story, and you cannot hope to have a good story without the characters to drive the story. So, yes. So my talk today will be starting from the beginning, the story. I'm going to do a little bit about the story before we go into the character. So first of all, writing your story. How do you write a story that is good enough for you to have a good character? It starts with a clear central message. You know, your message may be not so clear in the sense of, like she said, having a defined exact beginning, but you need to know what you're trying to do with your story. Am I trying to make the characters laugh? I mean, the readers laugh when they read the story, or be angry about something, or be sad, or inspired? You know, you need to know what that central message is. And that will help you determine who is the character that can carry this kind of story. So if it's a funny story, you can't have a non-funny character. You don't have to talk about how do I make a compelling, funny character. You're trying to make them angry. Whatever it is you're trying to do, somebody needs to bring out the anger in the character, in the characters, and then you need a character that will bring it out and make people to, you know, be compelled by such a person. Then conflict. If the story is just straight, somebody wants love, and love is just down on the table for him or her. There's no conflict there. What if the person this lady wants to love is also currently married with 2 children, and she's trying to get that person? That's conflict. How do you deal with the wife in the house? How do you deal with your conscience breaking a marriage? Maybe it's a very loving father and all of that. So there has to be some kind of conflict. A politician wants to become the president, but there's somebody who is spending a lot of money and a lot of violence as well, willing to go extra miles to make sure you don't get the presidency. So how does that work? That's conflict. Then this is something very important for me, you know, personal experiences. I kind of, when I read books, the first thing I look out for, especially for books that are not sci-fi or stuff, even sci-fi fiction, is the way you can make it almost put some real life things in it. So let your stories carry some things that people can relate with. If a character is a particular way, can they see that kind of character in the real life? Like, is there somebody in real life, they will say, this is like Kolade, this is like Swede, this is like Yewande, this is how Yewande behaves when she's in the same situation. People want to be able to say this thing happens in real life to an extent. Even for sci-fi, you will find some life-like situations in the so-called, you know, fictional world you're trying to create. And then the next thing is have a defined structure and plot. You know, again, I'm going to follow what Yewande talked about, not having a story that you know the beginning, the end from the beginning. I'm also like that, but I want a kind of end. In the end, will there be a resolution? I may not know the exact way this character will die in the end, but I want to know that this person will eventually die for this thing to happen in a way that this thing will happen. And having that plot lets you know what kind of character you need to create. So you need to start with, you need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. What would happen? What will make the climax to, what will be happening at the climax, and what will have come as our resolution? You need to have this. Then, very important, don't have so much backstories. Sometimes I think backstories are excuses for bad writing. So because you're not able to bring out why a character is maybe say angry, you say, oh, let me go back to some flashback. You do a little flashback and come back again. Every time you have a new character, you bring a flashback. In the end, people are, you know, you are throwing your character, your readers here. And let me just take a moment to say this. I talk very fast, so if I'm going too fast, please kind of like, if you don't get anything, put a comment or, you know, say something. Yeah. So just let me put that on the table for everybody. Then the last thing on this writing the story is give your character clear goals and a mission. Just like you have a structure and a plot. What is this person's goal in that plot? So you have a structure already. This is how you want it to be. The story is going to be a woman who is lonely. I'm taking off Yewande's story. Lonely woman wants love, and then is she going to get the love, or is she going to get something else? Is she going to get her need or her want? You have that as your structure, as a plot. So who is going to be the conflict? What will be the conflict? The man she wants, she's going after is already married with kids. That's kind of like conflict. Then don't come and give us so much back stories. Like I said, of course, they will have backstories, a few of them, but not always. So you want maybe a backstory. Without sounding like I don't want backstories at all, I want you to make it clear that backstories can be useful, you know, but don't use them too many times, not too many, just once in a while, backstory should come in. And then for the goals, what is this woman's goal? She wants to be loved. If that is her goal, anything she does in the story should be towards her amplifying the need to be loved. That may mean going against certain things that she has professed at the beginning as her, traits. Maybe somebody who is very religious, for example. She's very religious, believes in all the rules of 10 commandments. Now she's coveting her neighbor's husband. It's immoral, but that is her goal and her mission, and she goes for it. Maybe she would follow her religious inclinations and not go for that man, or maybe she would go. That's where your storytelling comes in. Then now, after you're talking about the story, now what about the character? In my own experience, if you want a compelling character, you must have a detailed character profile. This is what Yewande was calling character Bible. It's the same thing as character profile. So what is your story? What would happen in the story? So we need a woman, definitely. From what I've just said, we need a woman who is going to be in love. And we need who needs love, who is alone and wants love. And then we need a man who is married with kids. For this main character, this woman who wants the story, who wants the love, you need to make to have, what does a typical woman in such a situation, what will she do? What's making her to be lonely, for example? What made her lonely? How come she doesn't have a love life already? Did her spouse die? Did she have abuse in her life? Was she abused and then she maybe cut off people? Is she a one-child family? She did come from a one-child family and such became used to being alone. What are the hopes and the fears of this person? A character profile will help you to structure your character. Of course, in line with this story you have, with your plot. You need to remember that you need to go back to what your plot is. What is your story? What are the characters that can carry that story? Now, it is very important to know that your character profile carries everything you do about that character. Now, don't think you have to have everything on ground at once, which is speaking to the person who spoke earlier about having problems with doing her characters on Excel and not knowing how to proceed because there's so much information. I think the problem you have is you have spent so much time on the research stage of character profiling. And I don't know if somebody had told you that character profiling is the most important. Yes, it is very important, but of course, you still need to do the actual writing. There is nothing wrong with going back, even after finishing the novel, to start changing certain things about the characters. In fact, it can happen that you would need to change some characters' profile entirely because the story has taken a new turn, a better turn than you expected, and you need to adjust some characters. So don't dwell too much on creating the character that you now forget to write the story. Start off with what you have. And if I may say, historical fiction is extremely difficult to write. The thing with historical fiction is not just fiction. You cannot lie a lot. You can only, try to bend what the truth is. We all know that 1960, Nigeria had independence. If you're writing about that period, there are certain things you cannot bend around. You have to just make it as it is. So there are certain characters you don't have to develop too much. So you have the British government and the Nigerian, how will you call them now? Freedom fighters or whatever you call them. They have their names, they have their lives, they have their families already. You don't create all of that. So it may be a problem for you to now start profiling them too much. I think what you should do is to focus on your plot now. I think what is important is your plot. What is the story? Like I said, the story is the character. Don't take the character and forget the story. What is your plot? What will happen in that story? Whose story are you telling? Is it a story we all know about? Like say, the queen meeting Azikiwe or whatever the story is, which is factual, is written in the news, or a man who witnessed that thing happen, who nobody knows about. So it means in that situation, you can write a lot of lies or fiction. Not that fiction is lies anyway, but you can write something, whatever you want to write, and just borrow in the parts that everybody is going to see. I mean, the one that we all know in the news. So what are you writing exactly? You need to define your plot. Your plot is a gateman witnessed the queen come to England and he stole the ring that she held in her hand and ran away with it. Is that what you're writing about? Or you're writing a real clear historical fiction? In that, if it's real clear historical fiction, then you should just do your desk research and Google about Queen Elizabeth, Google about United Way, Ahmadu Bello, and write whatever you have about them. But if it's going to be fiction, I suggest you just bend away from the truth a lot. Take a story, a side story, and write it into the full story. Rather than writing the full story into the side story. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. Yeah, so yes, like I was saying, the more you know about your character, the better it is for you to write them eventually. So if you know your character is, say, a lonely woman who lives alone and needs love, then you want to, when you're writing about her, you should not put her in situations where she doesn't put herself out for love, unless that's the conflict you're trying to create. Maybe she wants love, but she doesn't want people to know she wants love, you know? But if your character is somebody who likes coffee, we don't want to see her in the story later on. Maybe you're describing her room and you describe a shelf full of Bonvita and Fanta and Milo. Of course, we want to talk about her having raw beans in her, in a coffee maker and all of that. So those little details, knowing about the character, is what will help you to write them eventually. When somebody offers her coffee, in maybe a man she meets for a date, offers her tea, we want to see her saying, no, I want coffee instead. Or saying, yes, give me the tea, even though she wants coffee, because she's trying to bend to be lovable. So your character profile will tell you exactly what your character will do later, and it has to be deliberate. So like I'll run through this one. You must do your research, which is what you're doing now. You're doing your research. So what are you writing? Who are you writing about? If it's a real person in real life, know a lot about that person. If it's a fictional character, what is that typical person that people will relate to? A lonely woman in her 30s, what will she look like? Maybe she's religious. You tell us she goes to church, she's now in deeper life. She wears high heel, neck high tops, no revealing clothes. Like, what is that kind of character? How does that person look in real life? Let us know. And then the second part, the B part, is sketch the story plot. Like I said earlier in the story part, you need to have the plot. When you do your research about your story, from that research, you would now create the story plot. What happens to a typical person who wants love and finds it or doesn't find it? That's your story plot. She will meet many men who will disappoint her, obviously. She will get one and love him, and he's not available. She finally decides to go against her moral inclinations and break his marriage. After breaking his marriage, she finds out that he's not the kind of person she wants, and then decides to become a nun out of anger with everything. Or meets the man and finds out that she intends to break the man's marriage. The wife takes her to to a babalawo, and they destroy her life, and she dies feeling. So whatever it is, let's just have that sketch of that your story plot. Now, from your sketch, you would know what kind of characters you need. Like I said before, the story is the character is the story. So you have a sketch of your plot. Now, what characters fit into such a sketch? That is where you now you need a character questionnaire. This is very essential for if you're writing a serious piece. Maybe a short story may not need all of this, but maybe a novel, okay, you may need, if you have a key character. Like I said, if you have a story that is being character driven, where there's a main character who will have changes happening to him or her that will bring out the story, you may need to have a character questionnaire. This is just a set of questions that you ask all your characters. What does he do? Who are his parents? Are his parents alive? Are they dead? And now, mind you, the questions have to be in line with your plot. If your story doesn't involve anything that has to do with her childhood, then there's no point putting what is her childhood in the story. If the story doesn't have anything to, if it has something to do about her university, you might want to ask what university did she attend. Maybe she will meet a former classmate of hers and fall in love with him. So you need to know what questions are going to, help you develop your story. And then the main thing is now developing your character outline. After you have the questionnaire, the responses to the questionnaire is what you will use to design this character outline. Now, okay. So what are the things you have in your character profile? And back to the lady who is writing historical fiction, you asked something about how do you do it. So for me, in a typical story, these are the main things you have. What is the backstory? What is his or her journey? What happened to her as a child? Was she abused? Was she adopted? What's her name? What's her family background? Are they poor? Are they rich? Are they in the village? Are they in the city? Who is influencing her? Is she a Maya Angelou lover? Does she believe in Chimamanda? Is she a feminist? Well, feminist may be later in the personality, but yeah, the things that have happened in the past that transcend that past into the current story. So somebody who had an accident and the leg is cut off, that trauma is a very important part because you now come out under the physical appearance. She has one leg or two legs, which might be a condition for people not loving her. Was she a victim of a burn? Did she survive a plane crash, for example, and is now burnt, or somebody poured hot water on her and is now having, is this affecting why people don't love her? Is this why people don't love her? It's why she doesn't have a partner. So backstory, very important. This is like the most important one. Then physical appearance, how does she look? This is very key. You know, when you're writing a novel, the physical appearances are, people take it for granted. A lot of things can come well for your writing when you know how your character looks like. For example, let me give you a classic example. So you're writing a scene where there are 5 men, and you are trying to talk about all of them. You will not say the first man, the second man, the third man, the fourth man, and it becomes boring when you put their names every time. Chike, DK, you know, so this. At some point, you probably want to use an element of the person. So if we have somebody who has a limp already, which the reader know has a limp, you might just talk about his limp at that point for them to know we are talking about daily. If you have somebody who has a twitching eye, who always twitches, his eye always twitches, and you might want to talk about the twitching eye rather than talk about the person's name again. So it's very important for you to know how they look, what they dress like, you know, their features. Is a blind eye, one arm, one leg, very light skinned, all the hair is all white, you know, all grayed out. It's muscular. So you might talk about the muscular one instead of when you know the other person is slim. Is it short? Is it tall? Very important. If you have a question at any point, ask and just stop me. I would stop and continue from there. I don't want to be the only one talking to you. Are we good? Can we have one or two people just unmute themselves and say something? Yeah.
Yes, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, then the personality, of course. Is this person funny? Is he a loner kind? These are very important in the story's development. Are they virtues? You know, do you have any virtues? Is this person a moral person? Like I said about this lady, let's say she's a Christian, a real hardcore Christian, or a hardcore Muslim who believes in following the rules. And then these rules have not gotten her into getting a spouse all the while. Now she wants to get a spouse by all means. Will she break her rules? Is she somebody who is very rigid? What's her philosophy of life? And the last thing is the routine. The routine, what does she do? Where does she eat? Where does she eat? Because these are the things that will help us to create encounters with other people. If she eats in Jevinik, maybe that's where we are going to make her to meet somebody who is maybe the manager of Jevinik, or if she's somebody who likes football, she goes to the viewing center, maybe she'll meet a football fan. So these things are very important. But favorite song, favorite book, maybe she might be reading a book that's her favorite book, or she goes to a library and finds a guy reading a book she loves so much, which you have as a writer, you have pre-introduced to people that she loves, say Yewande Omotoso's book, and then she sees a man reading his book, and then she says, reading her book, and then she says, I don't have this book, and then you build up a relationship from off there. This is why this character profiling is very important. It helps you to set up the character for a smooth story. And the reader also doesn't get offended when you suddenly drop in pap. Suddenly, we don't know that she likes reading, but she falls in love with somebody who is reading a particular book, but we don't even know before that she is a book lover or that she reads at all. So I don't know if anybody's seen why the character profile becomes very important. Yes, so there are some very key features of a compelling character that you need to have. The first thing is that the backstory is relatable. Now, I dropped something in the comment earlier where I said in writing more than in any other field, you need to break the rules. Like the rules are there for you to be broken, but you need to know them first. So don't take anything here as the absolute pattern that you must follow. That's what I just want to put that there for you. A backstory that a character has may not be relatable, but it has to be made believable by the writer. So if you don't have a character, a backstory that everybody is aware of, that everybody can say, yes, this is something that happened to people, you must make sure that at some point, as you keep on writing, make it believable, it becomes realistic. So people don't just say, what kind of rubbish is this? So the story, the backstory must be able to overlap the current state. There's no point telling us about somebody's backstory if the backstory doesn't influence anything now. So if you say somebody is a victim of abuse and you don't even say anything about, show us in her character. Maybe we see her protecting a young girl in her neighborhood or reacting violently towards sexual advances. If you don't see any of that, then it might be that that backstory was not necessary in the first place. Then a compelling character also faces a defined conflict. Like I said earlier, conflict. If there is no conflict, there is no story. The conflict can be internal or external. Like in this case of Our Lady we are talking about, she is struggling with her morality of Christianity or Islam, not allowing her to go after somebody's husband or whatever. And she's also struggling with the physical one of trying to, take somebody's husband, and the woman is aware she's coming to take her husband, she's trying to fight her. So this conflict could be physical, could be internal, could be social, could be environmental, but there has to be some common form of conflict. Is a guy trying to leave Nigeria, is he trying to japa, and what is stopping him from japaing? So if a woman is trying to japa, for example, and she has a child here that the father is not willing to let go, and she's also not wanting to leave the child in Nigeria, that's a serious conflict. How do you take your child from a man who wants to keep him? Will you stay in the country and fulfill your dream, or will you go and come back later for it? Each decision is a conflict that has a consequence. So let there be some sort of conflict that the character is following through. Then for me, a very important one is character integrity. This is like I said earlier, somebody who loves coffee, and she goes out to and say, what do you want to do? Say, I want tea, or I want Lipton. And this is not consistent with the character who we have described as a coffee lover, who probably we've seen her talking to her friends and then, oh, take coffee. If you want to buy me a birthday gift, give me a coffee, or get me, somebody's traveling abroad, she said, when you're coming back, bring me Turkish coffee. The character has to have integrity, which is, it does things the way that that character would do. Now, a caution here is, a character that has integrity doesn't mean the character will remain exactly the same. Like Yewande said, at the beginning, you say sex is bad. At the end, you say sex is bad. This is possible, but not necessary. A character can come from the beginning and say sex is bad, and then at the end still say sex is bad. But the manner of saying it may be different, or even entirely at the end saying sex is not bad, or it may be bad, but there are exceptions here and here. That shows that the character has an arc, he has changed, he has moved. But integrity is saying the character is following what you would expect of such a character based on what we have seen in the beginning of the story. So we don't just see a man who is an absolute lover of his wife and children, who doesn't want to cheat on his wife, suddenly just cheats on his wife and leaves her for another woman without having a physical turmoil. Let us see that change happening with pain and with purpose, with the, you don't just say, the man yesterday was saying, I love my wife, I can never leave her, my wife for you. Then tomorrow he's saying, I'm leaving my wife for you, without you saying either the woman don't go do juju, maybe she don't go do, what do they call her? There's this name, they call it Jaruma, or what they call it, something like that. But you have to have, it has to be believed, there has to be a reason why something happened. So maybe the man, somebody who is supposed to be a strong believer in something changes, there should be maybe a life-changing experience, maybe a near-death experience, maybe somebody who believes so much in justice that now suffers a great injustice in the hand of police, comes out and becomes a criminal. Yes, you can believe that. But somebody who is so just and so good as a person, suddenly becoming a criminal, without you explaining it to us and showing that transition, that character will never be compelling. So to take it back, give the character a good backstory, put them inside the conflict, and make sure they have integrity during the process of the stories happening. That would give you a character that is compelling, but also depending on how well you write your story anyway. Your story must be well written, like I said before. The story is the character, and the character is the story. Oh, sorry. Oh. Problem. Give me a minute.
If you want to go back to the slide, you can click the previous button.
Yeah, I am doing that.
Are you using a mouse?
Yes.
Okay, so click the left one. You're clicking the right one.
Yeah, I'm actually doing that so many times now. Yeah.
Okay.
So now this is where we are going to round it up, but it's very important for us to summarize everything in this. Outside of these previous three things we talked about, the backstory, the conflict, and character integrity, all of this boil down to having these four crucial elements. A strong need, whatever you call it, a need, an ambition, a goal, a purpose that does not come easy. If you make it to come easy, then she wants love, she finds love, the man leaves her as wife, and they follows her, and that's what's the whole, we don't even see anything there. So conflict comes in because the ambition or the goal to be pursued doesn't come easy. You want to go overseas, you don't have money for the visa, that could be one problem. You have money for the visa, but the man you are with doesn't want to let go, or your boyfriend seizes your passport and disappears with it. There has to be some kind of conflict. Maybe in the process of now finding how to get him and collect your passport, there's a resolution. Now, there's a secret. This is another thing, a secret that would change that person's standing in society forever. So there's this woman, I'm just giving a different scenario, or a man who has 3 children, but he does, what most people don't know is that he's impotent. And even the wife may not even be aware that he's impotent, but she's also cheating. So she doesn't know that the kids are not his own. So everybody is just there in that, but one person amongst them knows and would not want that secret to come out. So in hiding that secret, there's a conflict, making sure that that secret stays a secret forever. Maybe the man is accusing his wife of cheating, but he doesn't want to do a DNA test because he knows if he goes to do DNA test, they'll find out that the kids are not even his, at all. And then he knows that he's not fertile. So that kind of secret makes the whole story very complicated. The woman also doesn't want to go for the DNA test because she knows maybe 1 or 2 or all of the children will not be his own because she's also cheating on him. And it goes round and round. That secret will change either of their positions permanently, and they don't want it out. So it creates a story that we just keep wondering what will happen eventually. Those characters, in their attempt to keep the thing secret while still pursuing their ambition and the goal, it becomes a very complicated situation that becomes very interesting for you as a reader. Then a contradiction, yes. When I talk about a character integrity, it's about the character staying true to what they are. A bigot, a lover, but then we can also have a contradiction that makes it very intriguing to the reader. Like you already talked about a thief, an arm robber who goes from robbing a bank and probably killing one person to carrying the money straight to the hospital to pay doctor for a child's birth. Those are two, strange, a killer and a loving father. So you might bring in those kind of elements. So you have a very religious person who's also a sex addict, a pastor who is also a criminal, who robs at night. So these things make the character very complex, and maybe both of their lives are so strong and believable that you find that, oh, this character is very, dynamic. And the last one is a strong point of vulnerability. In the example I've been using previously, the woman loves her child so much, she doesn't want to leave her child in Nigeria with a bad husband, and she wants to live so much. So the child is a very strong point of vulnerability. Any other thing she does is about, how do I get my child or stay with my child? No matter what the dream, she has gotten a scholarship to study in Cambridge or whatever, and she has gotten funding, a new job in the US or in Canada, but she doesn't want to live without her child, and this child cannot be taken away without this man's permission. And that is a strong point of vulnerability, which can make that character very compelling. So in living out the need while being vulnerable or having a secret or having a contradiction, you will see that your character comes out more compelling. In the end, it still boils down to having the character profile that you capture all of these things, the need, the contradiction, the fear, the vulnerability, the mission, the ambition, that you capture it very well. So when you're writing your plot and you say this main character will have this need, we have this vulnerability, we have this secret, and we have this, challenges in trying to get the need. They help you to create a character that is very believable. So in all of this, what I will come back to it to is saying, once you have your story, your good story, ensure that you pick up a very good character that will tell the story, but know that character very well. There is no way you create a compelling character without having a direct link between that character's profile and the story. And that starts with having a good character profile. Thank you. Now, can we have your comments, your questions, and direct questions, really, something you really like to know. Comments. I think Zoom should have a way of adding Kukogho to the chat so that I can start sending Kukogho around.
Hi guys, I have a hi, thank you so much. This was a very detailed session. I enjoyed it. I had my first question was when you were talking about the contradictions.
Yes.
That point, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I'd like you to throw more light on that. That's the question or the part I want. Then as it pertains to, when you're talking about, when you gave the example with how, for let's say a man who knows he can't have children and then his spouse to his house. I remember, I don't know if you've read it, but there's this book, Secret Lives of Baba Segi Wives.
Everybody, of
it's
course.
A bit different in that, I like it, of course. It's a bit different in that he wasn't aware, right? But I just could immediately see, and I was like, So that is why those characters were so compelling. And I loved what you said in the beginning about how it's a compelling character. Like, I didn't know of that thing that with two stories, it's either character driven or plot driven, but how they can influence each other. So that thing you had said at the beginning, I think now that's another thing I'm going to take away, like when I see a book, because there was a point Joy had shared earlier in the session when she talked about how she can have some books and you're just like, I bet this book is no, I don't like it, and you stop. But I know I found myself in situations where I don't really send the story of the book, but I really like maybe some specific characters. Like, I like when they come in. It's even like with series. There are some series that you will probably even fast forward, you don't know what's happening. But then there are some characters that once they're speaking, once they're having the experience, you want to know everything. So I think that's another thing I think even maybe all of us who write and read would now take away. That thing about how sometimes, even if you're worried that maybe your story is not that, if you even have compelling characters within it, you would have people that would be, I want to say, allegiance to it just because they love how you've built such a detailed character profile. So yes, thank you. I've taken screenshots of everything. I do hope you would probably share this the slides and that maybe on your own social media to the ALITFEST team. But I really loved that. I love the point about plot driven versus character driven. Thanks for the insight. And I would love you to, as a final thing, just explain a bit more on when you mentioned that contradiction you might see in a character. Thank you.
So you've read Devil's Spawn, right? I know you're one of the people who read my.
Of course, I have read it. You named the
by the way,
after me.
Let me do the Igbo man style. This is my latest novel, and I'm going to use an example from here. You know, the policeman is a very straight pole. You know how he believes in justice, he follows it through, and all of that. But at the end, he manipulates the story so that the boy doesn't get, punished, get to jail after killing quite a lot of people. He doesn't want him to get into trouble with the law. So he just falsifies the story with the journalist just to cover up this same kid that he wanted so badly to kill him. And you know how all through the story was looking at getting this
how
boy.
to catch and get him, yeah.
Yes, but in the end, he's the one, protecting the kid from, public scrutiny, and then just letting him go, literally releasing the main killer. He killed the most people in the story, from the part where we saw. But you can see that character, that's a character, contradiction. This is, just somebody who wants justice to the core. He just wants to follow the rules and then get the person out, but he finally has to bend. That's a character contradiction. But we see why he had to bend. He saw how he moved from, oh, this is not just ordinary. This boy actually is under control. This boy is actually working on the side of good for a punishment of something. And then he finally has to let him, go away without having any public knowledge of his role in the story. So that's one. But on a more general note, is like a character is like this. Have you ever gotten home sometime? Maybe your father is a very strict person, and you come back from somewhere in the night around 9 p.m. and you say, hey, Dad, you say good evening, and you say, welcome. Where did you go to? And he starts gisting with you. Oh, do you know what happened earlier? And he didn't fight with you. It shocks you sometimes. Like, is this daddy or something? So, or you come back home and your boyfriend doesn't like to buy you guitars, but he doesn't do birthdays. And you come home and you see everywhere with all kinds of decorations and you say happy birthday, and you're like, what's happening? So there are contradictions that there are things that the character would normally not do. But when you look at the story going towards that point, in a story situation, you must drop hints and show us why that person is suddenly believing this. Like the woman we have been using, for example, she believes in God so much, worships and born again. You can even put her in a situation where she had opportunity of making big money for casual sex, and she says no. But suddenly you see her chasing a married man who has kids, and this man is not even the one coming at her. She's the one that goes after it. Why? But before we get to that point, we must make it believable for her to suddenly change from God doesn't matter anymore. It's and to be sincere, this is a real life story I experienced, where somebody who was the best woman in church, finding herself going to 50, she ended up taking the husband of somebody in the same church who already had 2 wives before and displaced all 2 wives and took over the man. So, there are some things that get to that, but you need to show us in the story why that character contradiction is happening. It can't just come out of the blue. You cannot just suddenly stop liking somebody who we describe as a Mercedes-Benz lover, suddenly starts driving Toyota. Is it that he became poor, or did he have accident and the only way he could afford was that at that time was that? But you have to show us why the character flows. So it's not an escape route for you to write a story and then now you want something to happen. You have to think, let me make him do this. The people will find out that this is dishonest. So character contradictions are meant to be used purposefully. It's not an easy way out. We do sometimes we do that a lot. We just quickly write the backstory. Many years ago, the person was like this, so you just find out and then end your story that way. People will know. People will find out, and every good thing you've done before that point will be bad.
Nullifies it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks for clarifying. I think I had assumed if we had to use devil's spawn, that I felt he had acted that way because he was also a bit grateful. His niece was protected.
Yes.
So now I see what you say about maybe along the way, we see the different exposures the character has, and that makes them act a certain way. And when you said this thing about dishonesty, a popular example that now comes to mind was with anyone that has watched the Game of Thrones series. The way we saw how certain characters were portrayed up to how it ended, and everyone's like, from where to where? So yeah, I think I now get that. Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yes, for Joy, yes. I think it is possible to have a story where the characters maintain integrity. That's also part of the profiling of the character. If somebody is unbendable, you've profiled that this person is absolutely unbendable. You've seen people, when I was in university, there's a lecturer who failed his wife 3 times in a row. The wife is living with in his house, who has 2 kids for him. She failed his course 3 times in a Nigerian university, 3 years in a row. And we had to do tutorial for her in the final year for her not to spill over, because that's the only course she was failing. It's unbelievable. And this is somebody, we believe that means the man has a rigid, he can't even help his wife to get 40 and pass the course and go. So you might have a character that is just like that. Like, what do you call it? In Things Fall Apart, Okonkwo might be somebody of that nature. He refused to believe that things have changed, society has changed, and decided to hang himself instead of, following the change. And the story is still my best story ever I've ever read. That's still my best book. So yes, your character can remain, firm on the path, but you must show us how they deflected all of those things that came to them. Why would somebody insist on, I will not marry a married man, if the only person coming for her is a married man and she's getting to 40 and she's getting to 45 to 50 and she's desperately wanting love? Why did she insist on being single? Why still yearning for love? You must show us why. That's what comes to the character profiling. This person is staunch and unchangeable and unbreakable. Yes. And for the first question, yes, I will send Ida. She can forward it to you guys. So yes, I like to keep on time, but maybe we'll have 5 minutes to answer any other question or comments. I believe that I'm also a learner. Somebody can, if you have a comment about this, you can actually just say something. Anybody? Is there, nobody has any comments? Okay, so maybe we will just hand over to Sunny from here. Joy.
Thank you, KIS.
Aida, okay, yes.
Can you guys hear me? I don't know if Aida back on the call.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, she's not back on the call. Okay, thank you so much. This was such a valuable class. I mean, I feel like I'm going from here to go and just look at all my short stories and see what I can do to improve and make them, better. I think my fear for creating like diverse characters has sort of been overcome today. So thank you so much for this. Yeah, so I'm going to send you a follow-up email, get the presentation for the rest of the class. And guys, we have a workshop tomorrow. We have another one on Wednesday, animation on Wednesday, poetry tomorrow. And of course, the festival would kick off proper with the physical opening ceremony at Roving Heights Bookshop, Gariki. There's a new store in Gariki, the H Medics Plaza on Gimbia Street. That's where that Roving Heights bookstore is. So on Thursday by 6 p.m. we'll be expecting all of you guys. It's going to be such a glamorous, interesting event. Please don't hold me to that. My idea of glamorous may be different from yours. Also, we'll be having a book chat with Chio Zoe on the opening ceremony day. So please come with your questions. It's going to be very interactive. Please, I forgot to mention that we have the town hall meeting where we're going to be talking about breaking into film. We're going to be discussing the gap between the writing, will I say, industry and the film industry in Nigeria. I mean, we have so many amazing novelists, so many amazing writers in Nigeria, but why do our films have such poor stories, such weak plots? We're going to be discussing this, and we're going to have festival director Teniola Tayo and filmmaker and advocate, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Ramatu Ochekliye on that panel. That will be happening on Wednesday evening. Come with your glass of wine or a glass of whatever you prefer to drink and join via Zoom. Thank you so much for staying through to the end of this. Thank you, KIS. I'll be ending this call now. So guys, please feel free to leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
MKS, I think since you're the host, can you help end the meeting so the recording can
yes.
stop?
All right.
Thank you. Great session.
Yeah, thank you.